Good morning, everybody, to those of you who've joined us already. So we've just opened up broadcasting and I can see that a number of attendees are starting to join us now. So bear with us for a couple of minutes and we'll be starting just shortly after 10 o'clock. Good morning, everybody, to those of you who've just joined us. So we've just opened up and we are broadcasting. We're just waiting for all of our attendees to join this morning. So we've over 340 people registered at the minute. I'm sure not everybody will join us, but bear with us and we'll go live soon. Thank you. So good morning again, everybody. Just bear with us for another couple of moments while we wait for people to log in and join us. We'll be starting now very shortly. Thanks a million. So good morning, everybody. Again, we'll just wait now another moment or two, and we'll just allow people to log in. Bear with us now, and we'll kick off very shortly. I can see there's still a number of people logging in at the moment. Thanks a million for your patience. Okay, good morning, everybody, and you're very welcome to this week's programme. So this is our third week of our SME Recovery and Growth programme. So you're all very welcome. My name is Shona McManus. I'm the CEO of a company called Osborne. I'm also a chamber member for the 3 chambers supporting this programme. So I've been the host for the last 2 weeks and will be for this week and next week as well. So as you're all very aware, our programme is brought to us and is fully funded by the Dundalk SkillNet and the M1 SkillNet in collaboration with the County Meath Chamber, Dundalk Chamber and Drogheda District Chamber also. As I said earlier, we've over 340 businesses registered on this programme. A lot of people are participating live, as we are this morning, and obviously we are also sending out recordings to everybody who's registered to be part of it. A couple of housekeeping things this morning. So firstly, you're more than welcome to tweet as we get through the programme. The M1 SkillNet, the Meath Chamber, the Dundalk Chamber are already tweeting. So by all accounts, feel free to like and share or put up your own tweets. And we're also recording this session. So the session will be available to everybody afterwards. We'll send a link out to everyone, along with any slides that we have and any documentation that we might have after today. We'd also ask that during the session, if you have any questions specific to the presenter, Fergal Brophy, this morning, please put your questions into the Q&A section. And also we will be using the chat function later on, but Fergal will take us through that in terms of when to use the chat. But if you have specific questions, please put them into the questions area so that we can monitor that, as we don't want to miss anybody's questions and it can get very busy with the Q&As. Everybody is muted automatically, but just in case, please make sure that your microphone stays on mute for us also. So moving on, in week 1, our first week was all around strategy and HRM, and it was Brian Harney, who's a professor from DCU Business School, who presented to us that week. And he very much asked us to stand out of our normal day-to-day thinking and normal thinking space and use a 3-stage framework now as we move forward post-COVID, well, as we work through COVID-19 and start to reopen our businesses again, and to use a 3-stage framework, and that being to reflect, refresh, and to renew on our business models as we think about them. In week 2, we did our finance strategy, which was Brendan Vinci. And Brendan asked us to master our new environment and our business and wake up the entrepreneurial spirit inside us again, to use common sense and put it into practice, into a common practice. And if you recall, last week he shared with us his rocket framework, which included everything under strategy from product and services, sales and marketing, finance, people, systems and processes, culture, and structure, strategy and vision. And this week we're absolutely delighted for our third week to be focused in on creative thinking and innovation. And we're delighted to have none other than the Fergal Brophy with us this week to present and bring to us all his knowledge and teach us on innovation and creative thinking. So Fergal Brophy, if you bear with me, I'd like to read out his profile to you to share the extent of his knowledge in this area. So Fergal, he's the entrepreneurial specialist at UCD Innovation Academy. And Fergal's focus is on providing advice, facilitating and mentoring innovation and creativity for corporates, SMEs, public sector and social enterprises. He passionately shares his experiences, hosts engaging fireside chats, facilitates high energy, thought-provoking problem-solving challenges with great learning outcomes, and fosters remote networks that endure using bespoke socializers. Fergal designed and delivered an on-demand problem-solving module for distributed students on the UCD Masters program, and has facilitated live online innovation programs for distributed staff at Enterprise Ireland, ESB, PwC and BDO, as well as Exec Ed-type students at UCD Innovation Academy. Fergal has supported in-person innovation initiatives at ESB, MetLife, Roche Pharma, Primark, Adobe, Amdocs, DFAT, the DPER, the NTMA and Chambers Ireland, and many SMEs. Fergal also co-founded the FinTech Open Financial Services in 1999, which he scaled and sold to Great Westlife Co. in 2014. So I think you'll all agree with me, we're in very safe hands this morning, as well. I'll hand over now to Fergal. Fergal, you're very welcome.
Hey, Shona, thank you so much. Thank you so much for that introduction. I'm almost embarrassed, to be honest with you, because, of course, I mean, really all I do is I facilitate and support businesses to foster their creativity, to be excited about innovation, and of course, to implement innovation. But thank you so much for that, Shona. And thank you to the Drogheda Chamber, to the Dundalk Chamber and the Meath Chamber for putting together this fantastic event. Yeah, it's a tough job following up on these guys, Brian and Brendan, and of course preceding Louise next week. But we'll do our best. So let's get straight into it. We're going to have a morning where you're going to be doing quite a lot of engagement. It's going to be very immersive, and hopefully, ultimately, thought-provoking, and something where you can take some ideas on board and implement them back in your own organizations. I mean, that is the key for me, is that you implement something some insight that you gathered from the morning. So it's going to be a combination of kind of conversation. Myself and Shona will tack a little bit, but it will also be where you're actually practicing creativity yourself. So underneath in the middle of your screen, for those of you new to Zoom, to the kind of Zoom webinar, so right underneath there are 3 buttons. There's the raise hand button, and honestly, you probably won't really need that. I think the 2 buttons that you're going to use quite a lot are going to be the chat button, which I will be encouraging you to use a huge amount to share maybe some insights from your own organizations, stuff that you're doing yourselves, so that everybody in the audience today can appreciate what everybody's doing. And also then maybe Q&As if there's specific questions that you have around some of the stuff that we're talking, and maybe some of the challenges at implementing them in your own organizations. So raise hand, probably not going to be used a whole lot. Chat, going to be used a huge amount. And of course the Q&As, yes. So let's kick off, guys. 135 days ago, the coronavirus visited our beautiful island and wreaked havoc on our social and economic life. And many of us fear that we're only in the middle of it, or maybe even at the beginning of it. Second waves are possible. Certainly, isolated examples of lockdown are probably an inevitability over the next few months. And you know, we all have a huge amount to do to ensure that we beat this virus and beat it out of the island. But I have been fascinated over that 135 days to see how individuals and organizations have responded to the crisis, to the pandemic. And I look at organizations, for example, like Block Blinds. Block Blinds are a window blind company based in Derry. And they very, very quickly repurposed their entire organization to make PPE masks. And it's so fascinating when you think of what they did as well, because they also approached Derry City Council, who owned the Meadowbank Sports Arena, the magnificent Meadowbank Sports Arena. And they asked them if they would repurpose the Meadowbank Sports Arena in order to be able to make these PPE masks. And Block Blinds can now have up to 320 staff making PPE masks at any given moment in time. This idea of repurposing not only your products and your services, but your entire manufacturing process, it's so compelling. On the bottom right-hand side, you'll see an amazing organization just up the road from you, CombiLift. And CombiLift, because they're essentially a mech electronic engineering company, primarily making forklifts, as many of you know, they looked at what could they do in terms of repurposing their skill set, their manufacturing set, to be able to help our nation at this moment in this moment in crisis. And they looked particularly at a single problem around ventilators and the lack thereof of ventilators. Many of you probably know our ventilator population in Ireland is about 1,100 in total. And of course, at different stages, and maybe in the future, 1,100 ventilators may not be enough. There's been a lot of talk about buying new ventilators. They're very expensive, they're scarce, and there was a problem to be solved. And Martin and his team at CombiLift looked instead at creating a splitter for the ventilator, so that a single ventilator would be able to service more than one person at a time. And again, similar to block blinds, this idea of repurposing what we have to be able to meet the challenges of a crisis at a moment in time, for me, again, it's just so compelling. And the hallowed ground of Croke Park, probably the highest touch venue in the entire country, where up to 82,000 people rock and roll at various concerts, but also meet for the greatest sporting occasions in our country. And even Croke Park was repurposed to be a testing center for COVID. Repurposing. And of course, in your own area, we've had great examples. There's many examples, but I'm just going to cite two. I cite the case, for example, of what Tommy Leddy did at TLT. Such an interesting a case study here, an organization. Obviously, it's a big venue, and it was repurposed, as you can see here, for the blood bank. And also, I understand, as a courthouse to meet the various demands of for both blood and for to continue with our court services. And on the right-hand side, another great example, Listoke. Some of you may know, or some may not know, that Listoke were actually the very first alcohol-based company in Ireland to repurpose to make hand sanitizers. So many of us may have seen other organizations doing it, including Irish distillers, but in fact, Listoke were the very first. And hats off to Breda Connon and her team at Listoke for this extraordinary repurposing. So as we approach the new normal, it is my theory that repurposing is going to become an essential skill set of all organizations. Of course, when we're reimagining our future and our business strategies and how we're going to meet customers' needs, manage supply chains, even manage employees and how and their ways of working. Of course, acquiring new resources is going to be key to that. But for me, repurposing existing resources has got to be a central part of our strategies going forward. And this idea of repurposing and reimagining, it's far bigger than just organizations. It's far bigger than strategy or business strategy. It also encompasses, for example, the very nature of our politics, the very nature of our society and our economies are up for grabs as the whole globe comes to rethink how we go about doing things, particularly in the new normal. So I went back and looked at what has the creative and innovative academics done in relation to repurposing. And I found this test by Guilford in 1967. It's called the Alternative Use Test. And in the test, Guilford challenges us to think of as many alternative uses for an everyday object as you possibly can. And he gives us a certain amount of time to do it, and away we go. And it reveals so much about ourselves that I'm going to talk to you about in a minute. But first, we're going to practice. So I'm going to give you 3 minutes. 3 minutes. You might get a pen and paper at the ready. You might get a pen and paper at the ready in 3 minutes. I'm going to present you with an object. With that object, you can tear it up, you can cut it up, you can use it whole, you can use it as many of these objects as you possibly want together. What you've got to do is repurpose them into something useful. Anything useful. And when I talk about something useful, it is repurposing we're talking about. So we're going to get us 3 minutes. I'm going to get the clock up. And we're going to go into the object. And the object is a ping pong ball or ping pong balls. So guys, ping pong balls, you've got 3 minutes starting now to think of as many alternative uses as you possibly can for ping pong balls. So it's very challenging. So I ask you to think about yourself. How could ping pong balls be repurposed for yourself as a person? Think through your body from top to bottom. Maybe walk through your house. Think about what in the kitchen. Where any situations in your kitchen where ping pong balls could be repurposed to carry out some kind of function. Your living room, your hall, your stairs, bedrooms. Just visualize. The more outrageous the idea, the better, guys. So like really have a little bit of a smile to yourself here when you're coming up with some of these ideas. It's difficult. You got 1.5 minutes done. We got 1.5 minutes to go, guys. Push yourself. Don't give up. Don't give up. Keep walking around. Go into that garden. Walk around the garden. Think, if I cut that ping pong ball in half, what could it do in the garden? Go for a walk in your local park. Imagine what these ping pong balls could possibly do in your workplace, in some of the social organizations that you engage with, in all walks of life. We've got 30 seconds left, but this is the really creative part now, guys. This is where you got to push yourself. Many of you will be thinking, oh, I can't do this. You can do it. We can all do it. And we've got 10 seconds left. 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We're done. We are done, guys. So what I want you to do is I want you to firstly count how many alternative uses you came up with. Sean is having a laugh to herself there, so I'm dying to see how many she got. But count how many alternative uses for a ping pong ball you identified. And then I want you to pick out the single most original one, the one that you think nobody else in the audience might have come up with. Nobody else. And I want you to open up your chat box. So just click on chat. You'll see it opens up the dialog box. And I want you to insert there. Now, just be one little bit careful, is it's preset to saying to all panelists. I want you to just change that to saying all panelists and attendees so we can all see them. And then put in the number and the most original. So something like 5 and something, whatever it might be. Okay. So let's quickly look through some. Okay, guys, keep going. Please keep going as best you can and keep them coming in. We've got, I'm just quickly looking. We got 80 people in attendance at the moment, 80 people in attendance, so you should be getting lots of them. A clown nose from Brona Long is fantastic. Jayan Walsh says, safe at the edges. I like that one. We've got Tamara Howard. Tamara Howard got 8, and her most original was to put them on the roots of plants. We got Sinead Lynch as an aid to help toilet training for a boy or a man hit the target. Love it. I love it. That's original, I'm guessing. Pauline Lynch says to use for massage roller on your back. Very good. And she got 10. That's really good. Look at this. Michael Hannigan got 13, including Inkwell. Shona McManus, hair bobbins for kids. Love it, Shona. And she got 7. Maura Byrne, 9, including a ceiling light roller for pastry. Wow. Love it. Love it, guys. Mary Bossel, she says to fill flower vases and toilet cisterns. Very good, very good. Put in toilet to help young boys aim better. Wow, that's a big thing around Drogheda and Dundalk, obviously. Drogheda and Dundalk and Meath. I love it. Seamus Daly got 7. He says to put over my pen to identify it. Like it, Seamus. Joe Flanagan says he got 3, including to place in a water tank to prevent water from freezing. Really interesting one as well. An engineer there, probably, Joe. And Siobhan McCreesh says including a swimming pool float. And finally, I'll just read out a couple more coming in there. A garden string light, a LED garden string light. We've got a mold for mini jelly desserts cut in half. Well done, Tamara, on that one. And to Shane O'Neill, an insulator for irregular shaped objects, very good as well, and a mold for chocolate shells. Really, really good, guys. So I love it. I have to say, I really love it because it tells us, it allows us to practice repurposing in a very fun-filled way and something you can bring back to your workplace. Why not open up your next Zoom meeting with your staff and saying, guys, guess what? We've got a little competition on, right? I want you to repurpose. It could be repurpose a brick, a broken pallet. It could be repurposing used tires, ping pong balls, a paper clip, you name it. There's so many different things that we can be repurposing. And then maybe a week later, you can say, okay, let's look at some unused resources that we have in our workplace. Maybe unused office space at the moment and say, okay, guys, so how could we repurpose this office space to make it useful to somebody or to us as an organization? Maybe if you've got transport that's currently being very underutilized, you might say, okay, how could we repurpose the transport? And I think this is how we are going to practice creativity in the future, is to look at this concept of repurposing. So let's look at what you put into the box. This test, to me, it really tests 3 things. It tests fluency, as in the number of ideas we came up with. So it's interesting that some people got up to 13 and 14 ideas, and that some people got 3, 4, and 5 ideas. There's nothing, you're not better or worse depending on how many you got. It's just different. But it also tests the freshness or the originality of those ideas. So again, some of those that we smiled at, or some of those that you looked at and went, wow, I never even thought about something like that. Again, it just opens our eyes to originality in thinking. And then lastly, it tests our flexibility. So I'll ask you to look at your list one more time. So some of the ideas that we come up with are derived from other ideas, and some are very distinct. In other words, they're not related to one another. So I'll give you an example. Some of you might have said, I'd cut those table tennis balls in half and use them as earrings. And then you might immediately said I could also use them as a necklace, or I could use them as an accessory for my shoes, or whatever like that. But to me, they're very derived from one another. When you go out to the garden and maybe it's a feeder for a plant, or seeding plants, or for feeding birds in the garden or whatever, again, they're quite derived, that set. So I want you to think about how many of your ideas were distinct, not related to other ideas, versus derived. And I'll just say to you that in general, about 2/3 of the ideas we come up with are derived from other ideas that we have. Only about 1/3 of the ideas we have are distinct. And I'll come back to that train of thought a little bit later on. Okay, really interesting, good stuff, guys. We're going to have polls in a few minutes and other stuff. And I'm even going to challenge you to one other little creative challenge towards the end. All a bit of fun, all flexing our creative muscles. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about innovation. I found this quote a number of months ago now that I absolutely love. It's from a UK innovation academic called Dr. Max McKeown. And in a lovely, very, very simple book on innovation, he proposes the following: our human history is the history of ideas. And I find that so compelling to think that actually our history is simply the history of our ideas. And of course, when you think about it, it's obvious. But the corollary, if you like, to that is that our human future is the future of ideas. So if our human history is the history of our ideas, then surely our human future is the future of ideas. And if you think about your organizations, so your organization's history is essentially the history of its ideas. And the future of your organization is the future of its ideas. And that's what should really ground you on why ideas are so important. Some of them we have fleetingly, they come into our conscious and leave our conscious very quickly. Some of them we test and they fail, or we test and we adapt and revise and iterate. And some of them we can implement straight away and they're successful. But all of them we're learning from and building on. So the future of your organization is the future of its ideas. How interesting is that? So for me, when I think about innovation, people say to me all the time, oh, I don't really know what innovation is, to be honest with you, because it's so overused and abused a word. But for me, it's very straightforward. Innovation is a new or a different way of doing things that creates value. And I just want to focus on that definition for a second, guys. It's a new or different way of doing things. And I love this idea because some of the literature and some people I meet think that innovation has to be very disruptive and transformational. It has to be big stuff. And I completely refute that. For me, some of the best, most innovative organizations I see are people who have small incremental innovations that everybody in the organization is doing. Everybody's changing things ever so slightly to better meet the needs of the customers or better meet the needs of the organizations. And it's the sum total of all these incremental innovations that make your organization a force to be reckoned with. So let's not just think about new as in it has to be completely disruptive and transformational or breakthrough, and think about it also as incremental and just small scale. The second thing is it's a different way. It doesn't have to be different. It doesn't have to be totally different. It can be something you borrow from somebody else. You look across at similar competing organizations or organizations in a similar type space, and you look to see how they're solving problems, and you say, hey, guess what? I can take that solution, bring it back and put it into my own context in my own organization. And suddenly that is an innovation because it's a different way of doing things. Finally, I just want to focus here on what do we mean by things. To me, there are 4 things involved when it comes to creativity and innovation. It's the development of new products, new services, new ways of working or work processes, and new business models. New products, new services, new ways of working, and new business models. And for what purpose is all this innovation being done? It's to create value. And when we mean value, of course, some of that could be profit, bottom line. But I think also it's value in terms of helping to make progress in people's lives, making people's lives better, whether that's your customer, whether that's your employees, your suppliers, or other stakeholders in your organization, making their lives better. So it's a new or different way of doing things that creates value. And now more than ever before, guys, it is a question of it's innovate or die. That is just the simple reality. We mightn't like it, some of us, because we don't like change too much, but it's a table stake now in business that we're innovative, that we're creative. It's innovate or die. And probably a bigger challenge for us to innovate than ever before, because now many of us are working remotely. We are trying to collaborate on the likes of Zoom meetings, for example. And while it's very easy to do that for business as usual stuff and transactional related stuff, it's not so easy to collaborate online, and requires a slightly different set of skills and a different set of tools. And some of those tools I would see is those of you involved in an innovation group. First among equals for me is the WhatsApp. You have a WhatsApp group, you set it up so that if you're walking the park in the evening and you're thinking about something, you can quickly input it into the WhatsApp group and share it. You might see an article online that you're reading and you quickly put up the link on your WhatsApp group for your WhatsApp innovation group, if you like. So for me, it's first among equals, and many organizations I've been speaking to over the last number of weeks have really begun to understand the power of WhatsApp in an organizational sense. Other tools, of course, is the likes of Zoom or Teams or Google Meet or whatever your video conferencing is. But again, I would advocate strongly that you need to use a lot more than the video chat itself. So using the chat function, and again, I'll say to you during this particular presentation, keep putting stuff, your views into chat there. Anything that maybe you have experience of, or if you have a comment on and you kind of go, Fergal, I totally disagree with using WhatsApp, or I totally agree with you, or we use it for this, or we use it for that. Please keep putting that into chat. Similarly, in relation to the video conferencing, for me, the video chat part is only a small part of it. The text chat is a huge part of it, but so too is using whiteboards, for example, and post-it notes like Jamboard, shared docs like Google Docs, for example, and other tools that you may find that you might find that works for you guys. But these four in particular for me are the kingpins of virtual collaboration, So we're going to take a little break. It's 2 minutes. It's something I would also advocate strongly, is that in a lot of these digital meetups, that you don't try and go for too long. You just go for a couple of minutes, and we go for like a half an hour, 40 minutes, and then take a couple of minutes break. So let's do it. 2 minutes. I'll see you back here in just 2 minutes. So yeah, quick stretch. Get your hands up in the air, touch your toes, wriggle your fingers, anything at all that just gives you a little bit of a kind of refresher. Very good for our brains, we know that. Activating the creative side of us very quickly when we move. And I think we're good to start, Shona. Yeah.
Good to start. Very good. Yeah, great.
Okay, guys. So we're going to launch our first poll, our very first poll. And I'm going to ask Jack there to launch it up. So we talked about innovation being a new or different way of doing things that adds value. And those things were relating to new products, new services, new ways of working, and new business models. So I'm going to ask you all if you could very quickly vote. What do you want your ideas to focus on, or the ideas of your organization? What is the most pressing requirement you currently have to innovate? There's 79 in the room. I want everybody to vote, guys. Everyone to vote. Come on, keep it going. There's 30 out of 80. 30 out of the 80 have voted, but it's going up quickly. We've breached the 40 mark. Come on, keep it going. It makes it more meaningful the more people we have voting. So just put your vote in there on the poll. What do you want you or your organization to focus on when it comes to innovation? Currently, is your requirement around new products, new services, new ways of working, or new work processes, or new business models? We're going to close that poll in about 1 second, 5 seconds. 5, 4, 3. Keep going, guys. Couple more votes. A couple of more votes would be great. Let's close up that poll, Jack, and let's share the results. And look at that. A whopping almost 60% of you want your ideas to focus on new ways of working, new work processes. Sean, is that surprising for you?
Just unmute myself. Yeah, it isn't. I think, well, for us, we would be looking for new ways of all of the things that we are doing, but definitely new ways of working. We're all working remotely, so we're trying to figure it out. So it's not that surprising.
And of course, yours is a fantastic service organization. For manufacturing organizations in particular, the challenges are there around ways of working. That's an enormous challenge. Anybody like to put into the chat box there, guys, why did you vote for what? Let's keep the chat box going, and let's keep sharing as much as we possibly can. Just remember, when you're putting into the chat, you need to make sure that it's to all panelists and attendees. So you need to just click down on that to button. Yeah, from my own point of view, I have to say, if I did this time last year, I have no doubt 90% of people would say new products. It just shows you how quickly things change and our orientations and focus change. Of course, new ways of working it's huge now with social distancing, with hygiene, with all the related virus-related stuff that we have all around us. I also, of course, Shona, you're right. I mean, the reality is that if it hadn't been a fifth choice there, all of the above, everybody would have went for all of the above. And I know that because I did that one time about 2 months ago. And there's not a lot of information in that when you have everybody doing the same. But
yeah,
of course,
well, I definitely would have anyway. And I know, like, even for us thinking about new ways of how do we deliver our services, because obviously the nature of the industry that we're in being recruitment, and it's service orientated. So our clients are working very differently. So we have to try and understand that first before we can repurpose how we deliver, maybe, or find new ways of working.
And Shona, you've had you told me there, you have a couple of new products that you've launched yourself, or new services. Tell us a little bit about those.
Yeah, sure. Well, yeah, we did. Well, when COVID first hit, we pivoted completely, well, not completely, but a lot of our teams into healthcare, specifically frontline healthcare recruitment. So that helped massively at the time, as well as recruitment within essential services. But in our business, we would also do independent interviewing, and we've helped some of our clients with remote onboarding and remote interviewing processes. We also have gone through like screening processes for some of our clients, where they send all the applications to us and we go through all that side of the recruitment process for them. So that's changed. We were doing that anyway, but there's more and more of that coming to us because it's getting busier for them internally and they need additional help. And we also set up a new business a couple of weeks back, which is very much focused on career consulting for people. So people who are, recruitment companies do that, but they don't sit down for hours and work and coach people through career development, which is all the knowledge that we have. So we set up a new company to do that as well, because there's so many people unemployed now, and potentially that might get worse. So good timing. Oh, we've also done an awful lot of outplacement for some customers as well. So whilst we've always done that, we never really sold it as such as a service. So we had to quickly get that packaged up from a marketing perspective and get it out to market.
Mary Bossel, Mary Bossel, I'm going to ask Jack here, Mary, if he'll bring you into the conversation. I see a very good comment in your chat about you need to find new ways of keeping older, experienced and active people engaged and make contact with businesses and older people. Mary, Jack,
yeah.
are you fine? Yeah, Mary, you're on now.
No.
Yeah.
Yes, I retired myself very recently, and I have to say I've just adored all these talks organised by Osborne, and they're into recruitment. Older people are afraid to go to recruitment companies because they kind of get a little bit dismissed, especially once we're retired. And I think what you're saying, I agree totally. We have to innovate. First of all, everyone's afraid of us, that we won't be flexible. But in actual fact, we've made our money. We're not into careers. We're not into the ego anymore. We're past all that. What we're looking for now is we want to kind of go out and be engaged and feel useful.
Now, Shauna, what are you doing for older?
Yeah.
What are you doing for older people?
Mary, we love people who are retired, I have to say. So, and especially say pre-COVID as well. Now, COVID has thrown us all into a different scenario, but pre-COVID, there was such a shortage for skills and talent and good customer service. And, you know, we'd often hear things like that certain personal competencies have changed in different generations, are working differently, etc. So there has actually been quite a demand prior to COVID in trying to attract people out of retirement into certain jobs. So I would say, Mary, certainly if that's something you're interested in, come and talk to us, that's for sure, because and there's ways around dealing with things like that. If you're finding that that's the case, I would say it's not about your age. I would say that an awful lot of candidates in the marketplace often do not hear back from recruitment companies because there's just so many candidates that apply for jobs out there, you know, and it's more a process issue for certain recruitment firms. But Mary, come and talk to me after this and we'll have a chat and let's see how we can.
Good on you, Mary. Nice one.
Thank you, Fergal. Thank you,
Mary, and thanks. And Laura, I'm going to ask you. Maybe Jack has just unmuted you there, Laura Hendrick. You have something that's very close to my own heart, in fact, and you might share with us.
Well, I'm a visual artist, and I have found the whole COVID has put me into a spin because went newly self-employed as an artist just the beginning of the year, and classroom-based tuition was going to be my bread and butter, basically, because the reality is selling an art piece is few and far between. You know, you can't really rely on it for regular income. So now the classroom setting is kind of out the window. So I'm really trying to look at how I'm going to do interactive classes digitally. And I have a fear because I don't want to lose the personal interaction you have with a one-to-one. So it's completely spun everything on its head for me. So that's where I'm at, trying to figure out how I don't lose that personal interaction, but also try and keep up to speed with all the new changes that are going to have to be in place.
Interesting enough, because of course, Laura, I mean, I think artists in particular, it's such high touch. You know, when you're dealing with artists and training and even rehearsing, we need to be very close to one another when we're doing it.
Yes.
And of course, we're going to lose some of that magic as we try and go online, but it's needs must, isn't it? It's just it's the only show in town. You've got to.
Yeah. There's no choice. I mean, I'm going to try and, you know, get stuck into it and looking at ways of doing it, really, because there is no choice, you know. And I'm excited and I'm a little bit scared, to be honest.
And that's natural. That's completely natural. But I guess, Laura, the one thing is you can learn a lot from the best in the business. Like I see the likes of Met in New York and all the stuff. I'm following some of this, and my wife is following some of it at the moment. And there is some really brilliant stuff being done, and it's really groundbreaking. And I guess you can kind of be inspired, let's say, by that kind of stuff. But it's not easy. It's not easy what you're trying to do.
No, definitely not.
But again, there's help out there. You know, there is a lot of help out there for the likes of what you're doing, and you just need to reach out and try and see who can help you best. What about Killian Hanratty? Killian, maybe I'd ask you to come in. Guys, for everybody else, just keep populating the chat box. That's so, so important for us during this, and then everybody else can learn from one another. Killian, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Hey, Killian, how are you?
Not too bad. How's things?
Great, great, thanks. Tell us a little bit about your main business focus.
So our main business for the last kind of couple of years has been the finishing of cadet pilot training. But obviously with all the kind of redundancies and kind of furlonging of pilots at the moment, people who are starting their pilot training are going to kind of curtail it. So obviously that strand of our business is going to go down. So we've actually been investing kind of pre-COVID, but it's only really coming to the fore now, where we're invested in new devices and new forms of training. So we're actually looking to expand more of a B2C or B2B, where we're engaging with airlines directly themselves. So obviously, once you're hired by an airline, you have to keep your training recurrent, and you have to do it 6 to every 12 months. So instead of kind of focusing on the individual, we're going to try and tie in with the reoccurrence training. So the profit margin might be smaller, but the need and supply is much greater.
Yeah. It's a big challenge you've got there, isn't it?
Yeah, so obviously anybody who kind of works in tourism, hospitality, travel as such, especially in the aviation leg of travel, is really kind of going to have to adapt. And as you were saying earlier, they're really going to have to kind of reevaluate what type of business they are and how they can change and how they can adapt to make themselves more sustainable kind of going forward.
That was my gut feeling, is maybe you need to repurpose the skill set you have for training pilots and look to see what other group of people require such a focus on safety and mechanical engineering and all the stuff that pilots have. Like who would be the closest other occupation that you see to those kind of people?
Well, pilots themselves would obviously be quite niche. So usually when people kind of go to study, be it a course or college or university, they kind of have a wide kind of platform of options to choose from. But when you become a pilot, it's quite specific. But that doesn't mean the training itself is as niche. So we're looking at kind of a wide range. So we could do like health and safety, fire management, staff cruising. These are all industries that could be kind of targeted and affected by looking at, say, marines, for example. So fishing vessels and so forth, or Dublin Port, or even the Army.
Kieran, you could, for example, look at training people in how to manage social distancing in hospitality.
Yeah, exactly. And how kind of like when pilots working together, there's a huge focus on teamwork. And one of the main courses is MCC, multi-crew coordination. So you could actually retarget and kind of look at how industries and teams, especially now with smaller workforces, how they can work better together in a more controlled environment.
Great, great. Listen, I'm going to bring in one more person. Kieran, thanks so much for that. Brian Kavanagh, would you come in to us there, Brian? I'm going to just ask Jack to unmute you, Brian, as you get ready to tell us a little bit about, because I love what you're trying to do here. Can you hear us, Brian?
Yeah, thanks. To be honest, I'm dependent on the ingenuity of my oldest son, who's quite creative and does a creative course up at DKIT, and you probably gather from the accent, I'm from Kerry, so I've been around coaching and leadership for most of my working life, and most of my stuff is one-to-one working with boards, and I enjoy the people in the room, but that's not going to be possible, or people are going to be reluctant. So I was trying to think, how can I get what a good board looks like in a visual way, rather than reams of corporate language. So come up with trying to say, get cartoons, so can just people see faces and not have any speech bubbles, but allow the audience to say what's going on here, so they learn from the cartoon about what a good board looks like, what a bad board looks like. It's just at its infancy, and I'm at stickmen level yet. So, but I see that as a way of which I can try and get a bit fun, but the interaction you would have in the face-to-face meeting, but also a way of having something I can replicate and standardize and deliver from home. So it's very early days yet. So I just put it up because you're stimulating my thinking. So it's not to show off or advertise, but I guess for me, it's a really good example how I've been trying to think this way, and today's just crystallized some of those things. So can I just say thank you for a really impressive hour, a really impressive 3 weeks. It's great. So I'm really enjoying this, and it's getting me stimulated. So appreciate it.
And I think that's the key, Brian. If it just stimulates people, even one or two inspiring thoughts, hey, wouldn't it have been so worthwhile? But what I do love about what you're doing there, Brian, is that you are actually thinking outside the box. You're thinking of a totally new way to communicate online and to interact essentially online, to replace what was probably a very inspirational way that you were doing it. So
well, I find it very hard because I'm the wrong age of stuff. So I'm used to the one-to-one. I'm used to the physical contact with people, and working a room and getting the inspiration in the room and responding to that. I really enjoy doing that, but that skill doesn't change. I need to think better about how I can use IT to do the same thing, and that's the thing I'm struggling with, because I'm being very derivative. I'm not creating new stuff. I'm okay with that, but I'm finding getting IT literate is really hard. So I'm going to get people to help me with that, because I just can't do that stuff. But I've got the ideas, so which is great.
That's fine. You've got your strengths, and then you've got to try and get people to leverage other people's strengths. You've got to try and do it in a way that's as economical as possible.
Yeah.
So you can get some form of funding for it.
Yes.
We've got a huge amount of grads coming out into the marketplace at the moment, all looking to get some kind of work experience and to get going at something. Yes. There's lots of choices there, Brian. Yeah.
Well, I managed to get 5,000 from a enterprise board grant for innovation. So I'll put some of that money to helping me trying to make this a reality.
Good. And you might reach out to DKIK itself.
I will do.
Yeah. Okay, good stuff, Brian. Listen, thank you so much for that. And so again, I'll just give you a quick thought that I had, and I'm not, it's only something to provoke rather than anything else, but people talk to me a lot about the challenges of virtual collaboration, or challenges of trying to change your business to online, and they say, oh, it's not the same as this, and it's not the same as, my skill set was, let's say the likes of Brian there, my skill set was really with people in a room, and I don't really have a skill set for the online. And here's the thing, if you're constantly comparing the online world to the in-person world, you're in a losing battle, right? So what I say is, it's not better, it's not worse, it's just different. And I think that's just a mindset that if you can grasp that mindset and stop comparing it, then I think you'll be able to make progress. Because ultimately, the new normal is going to be some kind of more blended version of, we're going to have in-person and we're going to have more online. And it's going to be some kind of blended version. And we're going to use probably the strengths of in-person for the in-person stuff and the strengths of online for the online stuff. So I think as a kind of, if you're taking notes there, not better, not worse, just different is an interesting note to write down. It's just a mindset thing. Okay, Brian and everybody else who contributed there, thank you so much. Keep going, guys. Keep going with the chat. This is where we learn more than what you learn from Shona or I, you're going to learn from chatting to one another. Okay, let's just continue on with some of the kind of inspirations, let's call them, or concepts. So how do you innovate? What kind of mindset do you need to be creative and innovative? Well, of course, the reality is we're all creative. We're all creative, and we all have been since the day we were born. Human beings are the most creative species on the planet by a considerable distance. So we are, but what happens to some of us, of course, is that the creativity is beaten out of us, whether it's by our schools, at home, by our workplaces, by some other social organizations. That creativity is beaten out of us because maybe people are too judgmental, or maybe we're too self-aware ourselves of the shortcomings in our creativity. But when it comes to creativity, I'm going to give you 3 or 4 big thoughts. So when Brian is looking to reimagine his board development business there, for example, or Killian is looking to reimagine his his pilot training series. This is my number one lesson, guys, is you got to think big and start small and learn fast. Now, what I mean by that is think big. So have a big plan. I'm actually going to treble the number of pilots that I've been training, or the number of people that I've been training. But I'm going to start it very small with some simple social distancing programs aimed at hotels in Drogheda, Dundalk and Meath. And I'm really going to learn. I'm going to focus on how much can I learn as I do that. So think big, start small, learn fast. This was Eric Ries. He's the father of the lean startup. He's essentially the person I've been most inspired by in my work, Eric Ries. And this is his number one philosophy. Think big, start small, learn fast. Second thing is, people say to me all the time, well, where do I start? And unfortunately, I think businesses as they grow get this wrong. So I see a huge amount of businesses that when you go and suggest an idea to the boss, the first thing the boss says is, that's a brilliant idea. Will you do a business case for me? In other words, viability. Can we make money? Show me the numbers. And this is the number one innovation killer, is that every single thing starts with showing me the numbers and a business case. Of course, we know that that's the wrong way. It should start with desirability. Does the customer want it? Is it solving a problem for our customers or our employees or our supply chain or other stakeholders? Do they want it? Do they value it? And once you can prove desirability, and then you move on to the second one, which is prove that you can actually do it, the feasibility. In all cases, you'll figure out a way to make money. If the customer wants it, you will figure out a way to make money. So the business case, in fact, should always be last in the kind of the way we think about innovation. Focus on desirability. And the third big concept I give you is that innovation is messy. It's very scrappy. This, you may not be able to read this, but this actually says, Frank Gehry, that fantastic architect that many of us I'm sure knows, the world's greatest architect in many ways, he says, you got to bumble forward into the unknown. You got to bumble forward into the unknown. And as you bumble forward, many times you'll feel that you're going one step forward and two steps back. And that's natural in the creative process. The creative artists in our audience will all be shaking their heads now, nodding their heads going, yeah, it surely is. Every day of the week, as you're trying to create some kind of artistic impression on a canvas, for example, if you're a painter, you wake up and you think that you're going backwards. But you got to bumble forward, and bumble forward, almost embracing the ambiguity, almost enjoying the fact that you've no idea where this is going, but confident in your own skills to try and get it to go somewhere. So that idea of innovation being very messy, very scrappy, it favors those who love ambiguity and uncertainty. It's an important part. And those of us who love the certainty and the sureness of what's going to happen tomorrow, we got to change our mindset, guys. We got to embrace the ambiguity, because the world is becoming increasingly volatile, increasingly uncertain, increasingly complex, and increasingly ambiguous. And it needs people with mindsets that can take on that challenge to work in those environments. So that idea of innovation being scrappy. And the final thing I'd say to you is that there are approaches, I don't like the word processes when it comes to innovation or creativity, but there are approaches that we can borrow. And my favorite approach is design thinking. It's the most widely used innovation approach in the world. It's the most proven innovation approach in the world. It's called design thinking. This is how to innovate. And it looks something like this. It's a 5-step process that starts very much with empathy, getting out and talking to your users, observing your users, finding out how do they currently solve the problem, what are the pains and what are the gains that they experience, but really getting underneath the customer. When we have those insights, that's what we're getting from the customers, insights, and insights drive innovation. It's only when we have those insights that we can really define the problem that we want to solve. Who needs a way to do what and why? Who needs a way to do what and why? And the who isn't all your customers. So the couple of things I see when I see the who part of who needs a way to do what and why. Who tends to be, like Shona would say, Osborne Recruitment need a way too. No, they don't. Osborne Recruitment do not need anything. Osborne Recruitment's customers need things. All Shona's there for is to fill those needs. So it's never, the defined statement, who needs a way to do what and why, never starts with the company. It always starts with the stakeholder, the customer, the employee, the supplier, other stakeholders. And armed with this, who needs a way to do what and why, which you remember has been born from the empathy work you've done, we only then halfway through the process start thinking about solutions. I'm going to talk a little bit about this in a few minutes, but the biggest sin that people commit when it comes to ideation or thinking up of ideas is that they jump straight to, they fall in love with their first idea. They fall in love with their first idea. And I'm going to talk a little bit about how we avoid that. And once we have an idea and we've landed on this solution and we were able to write it or articulate it in some way, we got to go and move into prototype. We got to get it in a format where we can show it to our customer or our employee or our supplier and say, what do you think? Does this solve a problem for you? And then when we do this kind of prototype, we got to get it back into the hands of the users and ask them, what do they think? So, of course, it's not a linear process. It's what we call iterative process. It's cyclical and iterative. And in fact, the quicker you can go through the iterations, the better. So we find that when you get those test results back from your very first idea or the idea that you've landed on, very often the customer is going to tell you that your baby is ugly. And when they tell you that your baby is ugly, you got to go back and say, why is my baby ugly? In other words, the empathy, possibly redefining the problem that you need to solve, coming up with a revised solution, a revised prototype, and getting it back into test again. And if you can do this 3 or 4 times in rapid succession, that's how you find the sweet spot. That's how you find the idea that has traction. Now, you might be sitting there thinking, well, Jesus, Fergal, that's obvious. Well, let me tell you, it is obvious, but it's not how most of us go about solving a problem. Most of us have gut feeling or instinct. I know what will work. And you jump straight into that solution and you launch it out in the market. And then when it doesn't sell, or when employees don't like it, or when suppliers don't like it, you're saying, I can't understand how that didn't work. So we need to rethink how we approach creativity and innovation, starting with empathy. So let's give you a couple of quick concepts in relation to this. Putting the user center stage. Putting the user center stage. I'm going to just tell you one story. I could tell you 100 stories, but I'm going to tell you one story, and it's about this company to the left. Some of you may know them. They're called eShop World. eShop World are a fabulous company based in Swords, in the Ryanair building in Swords, in fact. And they supply e-commerce engines to some of the world's biggest brands. Brands like Nike, Victoria's Secrets, and so many more. So a friend of mine, a kind of friend of mine, a colleague, let's say, he was a student of mine. I was mentoring him, but he's from Carlow, where I'm from as well. So we kind of had this kind of bond. And he had joined eShop World as a specialist on their e-commerce. So what eShop World actually does is when you're on the Nike website and you pick out a pair of shoes and you put it into the basket, right? It's only when you go to the checkout that eShop World take over, and it's invisible. You don't even know it's happening, but they now take over. They do the fraud management, they do the payment receipts, and they do the physical distribution of those shoes. So this guy had been taken in from one of the largest online bookmakers in Australia. He'd been headhunted and he wanted to make a difference. And he said to me, one of the big problems we have, Fergal, is that when people go on to buy a pair of Nike shoes off their desktop or off their laptop, they complete that purchase 70% of the time. But he said when they're in the checkout and they're on their mobile phone, they only complete the purchase 30% of the time. And he said, the problem I want to solve is I want to increase the penetration, or I want to increase the conversion rate on the mobile device to the same rate as it is on the desktop or on the laptop. In other words, the 70%. So he poured over all this data, gazillions of lines of data that he was able to take from the back engine of the of eShop World. And ultimately he came to me and he said, I know what the problem is, Fergal. He said, I'm going to be able to solve it. And I said, geez, that's amazing. I said, what is the problem? And he told me. And I said, and how do you know that's the problem? He said, the data tells me. And I said, well, what happens when you go online and buy a pair of Nike shoes? And he said, geez, I've never done that in my life. I said, what happens when you go to buy Victoria's Secrets? He said, I've never bought anything online in my life. And I said, wow. I said, why don't you buy something online, go home to your girlfriend, get her to buy something online, watch her as she's buying and see what happens. Just watch her facial expressions, watch her finger movement around the mobile device, see what's happening. And he did, and he rang me that night and he said, Jesus, you won't believe it, Fergal. He said, I thought the problem was over here. And he said the problem was over here. So he went down to Cara that weekend. He asked a number of people at home if they would buy, and he let him watch. And he eventually came back and he told the business, I've got it completely wrong. I was going to try and solve the totally wrong problem. I know now that this is the problem. And they set up a little shopping panel where, to prove that he was right, a load of customers came into eShop World and they actually observed them online. But I love that story, guys, because it's so human-centered. It's so customer-centered. The data tells you one thing, but nothing beats pressing the flesh, looking at people in the eyes, looking at people's non-verbal communications, and really finding out what is the root cause of the problem. So putting the user center stage. And to do that, you really got to adopt a beginner's mind. And I think that's what my friend from Carlo failed to do. He jumped into the solution. He thought he knew what the problem was. He needed to adopt a beginner's mind and say, I know nothing about what happens to people when they go online to buy. So I need to learn from them. I need to empathize. Adopting a beginner's mind. And how we do that is by getting out and talking, let's say, to our customers or our employees and asking lots of whys, why nots, and what ifs. Of course, the when, where, the hows, they're very important questions. But the real root cause of problems are discovered when we ask the whys, the why nots, and the what ifs. So again, many of you in the audience are probably thinking to yourselves, I know what we need to do to move our business online, or I know what we need to do. And you go and implement and you tell all the employees, you send your employees an email and you say, here's what we're going to do. That's the wrong way to do it. You've got to start with asking your customers, what do they want? How are they currently solving the problem? What are the pains and gains? Asking then the employees, what do they think? What is it like to be in their shoes before you ultimately craft a solution? So we're going to launch a little poll here, and the poll is coming up here now. Jack is just about to launch it. And the poll is a little poll about your current understanding of your customer, guys. So once again, I really want 85 of us in the room now. I want everybody to vote. My current understanding of the ever-changing needs of my customers is, my current understanding of the ever-changing needs of my customers is it unclear? Is it neither clear or unclear? Or is it clear? So we've, for almost 50 people have voted. Keep going, guys. Just please, let's keep going. Keep pressing the button. We've got 60 people out of 84 have voted, and it's constantly going up. So I'm going to give it another few seconds as we try and get the last people in. My current understanding of the ever-changing needs of my customers. And I'm going to ask Jack to end the poll and share the results. And look at that. 20% of you say it's unclear. And 50% say it's neither clear or unclear. and 30% saying clear. Now, I'm going to say something brave and I'm going to say something challenging. I said this to Shona as we were prepping for this last Friday. I'm going to call out those people who think their current understanding of the ever-changing needs of their customer is clear. I'm going to say that is not right. I spoke to a very good friend of mine the other day. He's a real deep thinker, He's a qualitative researcher. And he said to me, Fergal, that question is wrong that you're asking. My current understanding of the ever-changing needs of my customer is, he said, it can't be clear. Because he said the current situation that your customer is in is unknowable. Even your customer doesn't know the situation they're in because things are so muddy. Never in the history, I would hazard a guess to say never in the history of mankind have we been in a more uncertain time. Not only, just think about this, guys. Not only have we got this healthcare pandemic, a healthcare crisis on our hands, we've got increasingly nationalistic instincts of governments. We've got Brexit. We've got a massive change in the way our customer expectations. We've got huge changes coming down the tracks of what employees are going to be demanding in terms of the balance of working from home versus working from offices. Everything is up for grabs. Everything. And not only is it up for grabs for us as business people, it's up for grabs for our customers as being our key stakeholder. So the reality is that probably 100% of us, if we were to be really honest, our current understanding of the ever-changing needs of our customer is probably unclear. It is probably unclear. So that's my challenge to you. That's what I think. I don't mean to be overly provocative, but it's well worth your while thinking about, I think, is how well do you actually know your customer? Shona, let me ask you this. How often have you been in the last 3 or 4 weeks, and this is to be honest answer now, not the CEO of, but how often have you been talking to candidates now, right, about how do they currently feel? What are the pains and gains that they're currently experiencing?
So, well, our team, me personally, not a huge amount, maybe about 10 conversations with people who've reached out to me directly in the current market. But our recruitment teams will be talking to people every day, and they're getting tidbits of information all the time. And it's very frustrating for candidates out there trying to find a new job. And also some people are ringing us, they don't know what's going on with their own job at work right now. They can see it's very grey. They don't know what the future holds. So have we collated it into documents? No, but we are feeding the information around each other and talking about it ad hoc day to day. So it's not in a joined up manner, but we are talking about it.
And Shona, I don't mean to be overly provocative here, but
go on, yeah.
So here's the reality is that when we're selling, right? So when your recruitment consultants are trying to sell, they're in sales mode and not in learning mode. It's a totally different way they're thinking, right?
Yeah.
So you really need to understand your customer. You need to say to your guys, I want you to take a little bit of time out and ring people that we recruited, ring people that you know we've recruited in the last few years. And there's no selling going on. This is purely for us to understand where is their mind currently at in terms of recruitment. How would they think about trying to get a job at the moment? What are the pains and what are the gains associated with it? And my guess is that you'll come back and you go, wow, there's quite interesting insights have come back from those conversations, guys. And those insights will drive how you're going to develop your business in the future, would be my guess.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, we'll have a look at it. I mean, we would do what we call regeneration calls, the recruiters do now, not the sales team, and we'd have it split down between recruiters and sales, who does the actual sales. But in a lot of cases at the moment, the guys they're looking for market leads, etc., as opposed to selling jobs specifically to candidates as such, you know, because obviously the jobs have been defined. But yeah, it's a good way of looking at it for sure. Yeah, different spin on it to get more specific information.
So for all you guys out there who operate a B2B business, Shona's business is a classic here, right? Because Shona has actually got 2 customers.
Yeah.
So at all times, she has to think about customer one is the HR manager, let's call them, or the person who's looking for a recruit. And then customer two is the candidate themselves that they look to try and fill that position. Managing two sets of customers is very complicated. It's very complex because you're constantly trying to marry both their sets of needs all the time. And but many of you, my guess is 50% of the audience are probably in a similar boat where it's not easy to clearly identify who your customer is, because your customer, ultimately you have maybe somebody who provides the channel and then somebody who essentially buys. Okay, when you get all those insights, Shauna, then you kind of in some way try and make sense of these insights, and here's what you need everybody in the organization involved in the innovation to be cognizant of. It's a point of view statement. Who needs a way to do what and why? And this to me should be center stage at the meetings, at your online meetings. You should be constantly saying, okay, so those insights are interesting. Let's try and translate them now into a point of view statement. Who needs a way to do what and why? And you'll hear lots of different views, and you're going to be constantly going back and saying, but what insights did we gather that gives us that point of view statement? And ultimately then everybody is going to land on a single point of view statement. And here's the thing, you've now found the problem. And finding the problem is the hard part. Solutions are easy. So it's finding the problem, and this is the problem, the point of view statement. And now everybody knows what the problem is. You've really landed everybody in a single place. And now you can move forward into the ideation. A couple of things on ideation that I'd share with you, this idea of don't fall in love with your first idea. It's hugely important. You know, Shauna is a lovely woman. I have worked with her on a number of occasions in the past, but I've no doubt that when Shauna goes into a meeting with her staff and she says, here's what I think we should do, half the people in the room probably go, oh, that's a great idea, Shauna. Because Shauna's the boss. She pays their wages.
Have you met my team, Fergal?
But other
I have
people,
a team full of constructive feedback.
I know, and I do know that from
Great.
your fantastic, and you do encourage it. But in a lot of businesses, guys, the reality is that the boss goes in with their solution and everybody falls in line. It's not fear. It could be some combination maybe of fear, respect, and lots of other things. But ultimately, people are very quick to go, oh, that's a great idea, Sean, and let's do that. Instead of saying, that's a great idea, but that's only one idea. Let's try and think of other ways that we could solve that problem. So this is what we call divergent thinking. So initially, you need to be creating a range of options, a range of solutions. And I often think 5, I mean, you know, we shouldn't be putting these things down to numbers necessarily, but to me, I often don't let teams move forward until they have 5 different solutions to the problem. Completely distinct. If you remember back to our conversation around distinct versus derived ideas, I like 5 distinct ideas. And some of them might be completely impossible, right? But that's okay. At least there are ways that you could solve the problem in a world with no resource constraints. So this idea of ending up with a list almost of 5 different solutions before then you kind of quickly identify what are the strengths and weaknesses of each of the solutions and land on a single solution. So it's this idea that we need to diverge before we converge when it comes to ideation. And we need to think outside the box. Never before have we needed to think outside the box as much. So I use these stimulants all the time. I'm not going to talk too much about them. I'm just really going to kind of put them out there one by one. And this is a range of stimulants I developed myself around how we might generate these 5 or 6 different solutions. So the first one is to really get to the bottom of what bugs you. So what is the single biggest frustration or bug or hassle that the customer wants or has, that the customer has, and solve that. So asking yourself that question is important. A second stimulant I would use in order to generate solutions is to ask yourself what's next. And that's really, invariably that ends up with technology. What future or emerging technologies out there that might help us solve the problem? What future or emerging technologies out there that might help us solve the problem? And you'd be amazed how often this can be so simple and almost free of charge. I worked with a company recently, they're from Ashburn, and they're the McKeown Group. And I don't know if any of you have been following the McKeown Group story, but they're a construction company and an engineering, electrical engineering company. Brilliant, brilliant company, real believers in innovation. And when they went into lockdown, they knew that there was going to be new guidelines for when the restrictions were eased. And those guidelines were going to involve a lot of paperwork. And if you were looking to move subbies or employees around different sites in a single day, that there was going to be a lot of restrictions from the site supervisors around giving them access. And so they said, well, let's try and see if we can automate it. And they decided that they would try and maybe develop a website. And then they started investigating. They're a Microsoft company. And of course, Microsoft, many of you know, inside SharePoint, they have a little section called SharePoint Apps. And it's a free app building facility. And in 1.5 days, a team of 4 of them that had no prior experience of ever building an app before, no technical experience, 4 of them built an app. And the app is called Good to Go. And interestingly enough, they're using it throughout their organization. They have since layered on new functions onto it around other parts of their business that they found challenging. Like, for example, document control is now done through Good to Go. So a site supervisor who wants to see the latest plan for the site they're on, because they go through constant iterations, it's on the Good to Go app all the time. And not only that, but in a true spirit of Together We Are Stronger, McKeown's have offered this app free of charge to every construction company in Ireland. And I love that idea of looking to see, can technology solve the problem? And then not saying, oh yeah, well, let's go out and spend 50,000 or 100,000 on tech. Let's see if we can do this ourselves. And there's so much of that kind of stuff going on now that I think for many of you out there in the audience, you might think to yourself, yeah, I could have a go off that. Or maybe, Brian, the likes of your son could have a go off it. And you can say to your son, well, this is what I need. Can you try and see if you can do it for me for nothing or for as little as possible? So, you know, we have lots more resources than we probably think we have. Other ways we can stimulate ideas or solutions before we land on a single solution is to use association. So, for example, mixing and matching or combinational thinking. So how can we put together a number of things that are, or you might think back to how did you solve a problem in your previous life, or some other experience that you had, that idea of association. What we talked about at the very outset, that game we played around the ping pong balls, this idea of repurposing, I think this is so key going forward for us to come up with new solutions that is simply repurposing what we already have. I'm dealing with a team yesterday, they came back to me and said, just for a solution that they're looking for, and they said, oh, we're going to get this new software, Fergal, what do you think? And I said, I think you need to go back and look at all the software you already have and see if you can repurpose some of that software to solve that problem. Because what is the point in a new system, more money, when you've already got so much systems in that organization? And last night at 6 o'clock, they came back to me 2 hours later and said, geez, you wouldn't believe it. We can actually do this through Microsoft. They already have the system. It's going to cost nothing. Repurpose, repurpose. And finally, when it comes to solutions, don't be afraid to have what if or outrageous or spaced out solutions. Have some fun with their team. Say to them, lads, what would be the most outrageous solution? So a solution that maybe would cost a fortune, or maybe that would need a technology that doesn't yet exist. What would be the most outrageous? What would be the most spaced out solution we could think of? And then when you have those, so first of all, they're a bit of fun. They bring a team together. But when you have those solutions, it might be possible to pare back that solution to something that is possible. but the essence of the solution remains the same. And finally, looking sideways, SMEs, this is to me the #1 way to come up with ideas. What are they doing? Shona should be asking, what are they doing in other recruitment consultants across Ireland? What are they doing internationally in recruitment consultants at the moment? And then maybe take similar type of work to what a recruitment consultant does. So for me, for example, that is maybe a mortgage consultant. And what are the mortgage consultants currently doing, both in Ireland and internationally? And I think if you begin to think like that and looking sideways and maybe other sectors that Shona would know are similar to recruitment consultants and look at how are they currently solving the problems, there's huge inspiration to be got from that. Shona, is that something you do much of? Do you look sideways?
Yeah, well, I would say, and certainly internationally to some of our competitors and colleagues in the industry for sure, sideways to mortgage brokers and stuff sometimes. Not all the time, it's not a common practice as such. You know, ad hoc during the day, if we'd hear things, we share a lot of information internally. But I think some of the other looking sideways we've done has helped us to pivot so quickly as well and helped us to develop some of the other stuff. And as a result, not had to let people go or been able to keep operating remotely and stuff, you know. So we've done a bit, but we could do more for sure.
Certainly, I think this is one you look at quite a lot. I know, for example, I remember last year we had a long conversation around using artificial intelligence and other types of technologies, and you were really beginning to look under the hood there as well.
Yeah, like we were lucky just before COVID, how it happened we had implemented 2 new platforms. One was in relation to our day-to-day productivity and analysis of data and stuff, but it helped us the minute COVID hit, that helped us massively when we had to start working remotely. So we could see everything that was going on for all of our customers, and we were getting some customer insights as well in their trends. And then the other thing was more an internal HR platform, which we now need massively again, because we're not together with each other every day. So those 2 pieces of technology that we implemented, the timing was, we were lucky with the timing, but we've had to really quickly get to grips with how to use that technology. We didn't have the luxury of time to just get used to it, you know, but that's a good thing as well. We just had to get into it. But
that is a good thing. That is what you were lucky.
Yeah, and with relation to the AI and the artificial intelligence piece, we're actually in ongoing conversations on that side of things to help us with communicating with candidates. So say, for example, we just did a bit of a data analysis there recently. In this area alone, in the M1 region, which encompasses Drogheda, Dundalk, Meath, like Ashburn, Slane, all the hinterlands around us as well as Drogheda. This office, Drogheda Osborne office, has registered over 7,000 job seekers since January this year. So that's a lot of candidates that we've been working with, and the technology and stuff that we have has allowed us to get into that detail, you know. So and then we've got to work our way through all of it as well. So we're lucky from a technology perspective in terms of where we're at.
Excellent, Shona. Excellent. I think it's a little bit more than luck, if I was to be, if you were to be honest.
Well, I don't know about that. We've got a great team, in fairness, and we've been working with great people. We just have a question in the questions area as well, Fergal, just in relation to customer needs research. Can I throw that one to you at the moment? Is that okay?
Yes, please. Yeah.
So, great. So Ruta is just asking, and I hope I've pronounced your name correctly, Ruta, how much of customer needs research is too much, and where to put a line between that's what a customer truly needs and with my resources I can serve only a bit of their needs.
So that's a really, really good question. And the reality is, you know, people say to me all the time, how many customers should I talk to? This is the biggest question I get all the time. And my answer is always, you talk to as many customers in as much detail as is possible in the length of time you have. So if it was me and I had given myself 2 weeks, I'd be giving 80% of my time to talk to customers in relation to the problem. So the time I'm allocating. So yeah, it simply is as many customers as possible, but I completely agree with I get the idea of the question, which is you can spend too much time talking and then not enough time doing. I have somebody I admire greatly. You may have met her before, Sean, a lady called Ciara Donlan, and she's the founder of Thea Healthcare. And Thea make post-breast surgery lingerie for women.
Oh, okay.
And So how she did that, she was head of customer service at Vodafone, and she took voluntary redundancy in 2012. She stupidly set up a lingerie shop in Ranelagh, to quote herself, because she absolutely hated retail when she got in there. But interestingly enough, once she was in that shop, a number of customers came to her in the very first few weeks, asking her, they had just had breast surgery, and asking her if they had some kind of lingerie that could help them, both with the discomfort and with the loss of confidence, etc., etc. And she said, no, we don't do that, but go online and I'm sure you'll find it. And then eventually they came back to her and said, oh, we've been online and there's nothing there. So she started to get interested, but she devoted 1 full year to empathy. She spoke to hundreds of post-breast op women. She spoke to clinicians. She spoke to nurses. She spoke to existing lingerie makers. She spoke, but it all culminated one night in London. Now, this is from Dublin. She flew to London, and 80 people who were post-breast op had agreed to meet up and talk to her. And there was 80 people in this kind of ballroom in a hotel. And she said it was a very emotional evening. Many of the women were crying as they were telling the stories of their experiences and how they really wanted somebody to help them. But she had spent that much, but by the time she was finished, she knew the problem to be solved. And interestingly enough, the problem to be solved was only 50% around healing and soreness. It was 50% around loss of confidence. And she solved the problem around confidence. So she made the lingerie not only strapless and claspless and all that kind of stuff for comfort, but she really focused on making it feel like a lovely garment to wear and give women back their confidence. So, you know, I mean, it is a great story, because we need to lean in much more to our customers and find out what is it like to be in your world. Because Ciara does not know what it's like to be in that world. She has to depend on other people telling her and spending time with other people to really understand it.
Yeah, absolutely. And there'd be a great sense of purpose for her then in her day-to-day job, I'm sure, when she knows she's giving such amazing product back out to people who really need it. Like, that's fantastic. Yeah. Not mind just repurpose, but also sense of purpose.
Yeah. And interestingly enough, when COVID struck and obviously elective surgery was off the table, and she thought she was in big trouble with no elective surgery. And she got a phone call from Enterprise Ireland, said to her, Ciara, is there any way that you would know anybody who'd be able to make PPE masks for us? We are in desperate need as a country. And she reached out to her manufacturer in Slovakia, I think it's Slovakia, and between them, they were able to put together a significant order for PPE masks. And she has since used all the technology she uses because she's heard back all the complaints that people have around breathability, around getting small little spots, and lots of discomfort from wearing the PPE masks. And she's used all the technology that she has developed in the lingerie to make this amazing face mask that's fully breathable, it's reusable, it's washable, it's all these great things at Thea Healthcare. And it's a great example, another great example of repurposing.
Yeah, fantastic story.
So just a couple of things to go before we finish up. So once we have this idea and we have landed on a single solution, so what we've just looked at here is a number of ways that we could inspire us to come up with different ideas. But once we have this, let's call it 5 distinct solutions, and we carry out some kind of strengths and weaknesses assessment on them, and we land on a single solution, then it's time to prototype. And the reason why we prototype is exactly what Steve Jobs says, because a lot of times people don't know what they want until you show it to them. So I talk about prototyping, loads of different types of prototyping. We could do 2 hours on prototyping alone, but a couple of things. First of all, prototyping should start, I'm going to just go through this very quickly. I can see the bottom part of my slides aren't working, but Start with sketches and role play. Really rough and ready. No cost prototyping. A sketch. Go on to maybe something like canva.com, canva.com, which is a free graphic design, essentially graphic design for dummies. It's nice drag and drop. It's very simple to put together some nice communication. But whether it's a sketch or whether it's using canva.com or whatever it might be, start with that. Get out to your customers and say, so this is show no tell time. So you don't need to give the context to the customer. You just need to go, I'm emailing you this. Can you just tell me what you think? And listen to the customer. What is the customer saying to you about that particular solution? If you're a retailer in Dundalk and you're thinking of some kind of new product and you're thinking of how to communicate it, sketch it up. Use canva.com. Show your customers and say, what do you think, guys? And the customer will say, well, I don't really understand what that is, or why would I want that? Or why is that image like that? Image seems to be contradicting what I'm thinking that product is about, or whatever it is. And suddenly the customer inspires you, you get it. Again, a couple of these quick iterations, and you end up with an appropriate communication that's much more likely to work for you. So this idea, when it comes to prototyping, of starting really rough and ready, no cost, and then having the bravery to get out and show something rough and ready to your customers and get feedback on, that's the stuff of innovators. That is the stuff of innovators and learning. This idea of asking early, listening with an open mind. So often the reality is we're full of cognitive bias, right? We are full of cognitive bias. That's the way humans are made, if you like. And so really what we actually do when we come with a solution and show it to our customers is we're just seeking confirmation that it's a brilliant idea. We have this confirmation bias. And so when the customer says, I don't like it, you're thinking, oh, that's because the customer doesn't really understand. It's a problem with the customer rather than with the idea. And of course, that's because we're not listening with an open mind. And so we got to try and eliminate those cognitive biases as much as we possibly can. And only then do you move into digital representations that might cost you money, where you kind of get onto your graphic designer and ask them if they'll design up something rather than going straight to your graphic designer. And the key is that you learn faster by failing sooner. This is what Zuckerberg talked about at Facebook that became so famous and so contentious in the innovation world, because people didn't really understand what it meant. Learn faster by failing sooner. And the failing is just finding out that that's not what your customer really wants. So that's basically the presentation. I'm going to give you one quick game before we finish up. It's very, very quick and it's fun. But I'm just going to, those of you, so many of you might have found it very interesting and kind of said, I really need to brush up on things like this, because this is it is a moment in time where creativity and innovation is needed more than ever before. And here's some recommended resources that you might look to. So I alluded to Eric Ries earlier on when we talked about think big, start small, learn fast. So Eric Ries's book is called The Lean Startup, but he's also got another brilliant book called The Startup Way. And then there's these other books there that you can look at when you get the link to the recording later on. There's a couple of podcasts there that I love. None more so. If you have one podcast that you should listen to more than anything else, it's called Masters of Scale by Reid Hoffman. Reid Hoffman is the founder of LinkedIn, and he's got a huge back library of podcasts in that series. But he's so amazing. The set of podcasts, compulsive stuff. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to go back to this. So this we're not going to probably share on chat, but I want you to do it nonetheless before we leave. So your challenge is to combine one everyday object. So what you'll see is, so I'm just going to get the pen here to show you. We're going to use the pen here. So these are the everyday objects, right? All of these, they're just simple emojis, whether it's a car, a tap, a waste paper basket, a pencil, a love heart, etc., etc. Simple out. And these are a range of emerging technologies. AI, we alluded to earlier on with Shona, robotics, Internet of Things. We know what that's like. We have that in our home quite a lot with our thermostats and our Alexa. 3D printing, we've got mixed reality, you know, whether it's virtual reality or artificial reality. We've got blockchain, we've got big data, we've got drones and voice and collaborative technologies like video conferencing that we've just looked at, or Jamboard that we talked about earlier on. We've got biometrics and we've got gene editing. I've just picked 12 emerging techs. And what I want you to do is, your challenge is to combine one everyday object with one emerging technology to make a totally new product or service. You may choose to be inspired by the object or use the actual object. So in other words, for example, you know, it's fine if it's a train, you could be inspired by the car to think about a train, a solution in a train. So you don't need to think exactly what, I want you to be a little looser in how you're looking at the objects. Your idea can be as crazy as you wish. And if you know me at all by now, the crazier the better, guys. And forget about the next step, because what I'm going to ask you to do is put it into the chat box. So, what happened there? What are you seeing, Jack? No, can't see it. So what I want you to do is to think. Is it there? So I want you, sorry about that for a second, there was a little technical glitch there. So what I want you to do is combine. I'm going to give you about a minute, right? A minute to really let your mind free. And then you're going to put it into the chat box. Very briefly, what are you combining with what to create what? Well, I'll give you a simple example. So I'm going to combine the dog from the everyday objects with the biometrics. And what I'm going to use is I'm going to have a flap coming into my, from outside, from my garden into my kitchen. I'm going to get a flap. And the flap opens and closes by using the biometrics of my dog. So it ensures that my house remains safe when nobody's in it, but the dog can come in and out of the garden using biometrics, this flap. And I'm going to call it the iDog flap. So if you can put into chat, don't forget, when you're putting into the chat, go all panelists and attendees so that everybody can see it. I love Tamara's straight away. One from my own, it's Wine on Demand by Drone. Wow, Roy Broll, really interesting. Blockchain clock, like the Matrix. I love that one too. Chris Bass, house plus mixed reality. Imagine having a meeting not only through Zoom, but virtual reality where you can see all the participants in the room. That sounds futuristic, but it is possible. It sure is. Ruta, how are you, Ruta? I saw you making a couple of comments. Ruta is a big, big innovation lover and enthusiast. She's suggesting, Ruta is suggesting a portable home powered with a drone. Oh yeah, love it. Would be very easy, of course, for that portable home powered with a drone. So interesting. What about COVID type of solutions, guys? Anybody can I challenge anybody to a COVID solution? What about a portable home, Ruta, for people in self-isolation? So, so for example, if I'm heading back home, I can still move around, but remain in some kind of isolation. What about a picture frame that has Zoom type ability? I think video conferencing is going to inspire us to a lot of new ideas in the future, Roy. No question about that. Keep going, guys. Shopping trolleys with robotics, big time. I think there's going to be huge changes around shopping trolleys in the future because they're going to become much more hygienic. I can see us with no-touch shopping trolleys in the not too distant future. The pill mixed with the gene editing to internally cure diseases. Wow, love it, Sinead, love it. Brian Hurley, 3D printed flowers. Never forget that anniversary and print them at home. Love it as well. Sharon is saying the baby bottle with the Internet of Things. That is our future. Wow, that's another good one as well, guys. Football plus gene editing and robotics to create our new Super Meath football team. Jesus, it's nearly worth finishing up on that, eh? Could you just imagine a day? There is a day sometime in the future when Meath could win in All-Ireland again. And what about vehicle and big data from Brona? I like it. An automatic hedge trimmer from Mary, looking to ease her life a little bit. So good, guys. Love them all. And I am just quickly going to look through a few more. Toilet and Internet of Things. The light comes on and off when you enter at night. The toilet flushes if not flushed. Aimed at solution for children or the elderly at night time, saving electricity, light. I really like that one. Laura Hendrick, that's a really good one. Couple more. Shane O'Neill, a tree plus a robot, observe individual newly planted forest plants to identify plant growth, performance, or successful absorption of CO2. Very nice one, Shane. Tamara is saying sunglasses and gene editing is the innate shielding from the sun. I like it. Are we going to finish up with Anthony's? Jack, can you call in Anthony? If you don't mind, Anthony, very quickly, you're going to get the last say of the day. Anthony, tell us about the ultimate learning system.
So basically, you use artificial intelligence to help thoughts to be clear and ingrained in my memory. Through quizzes, use the artificial intelligence through mixed reality, and the results are saved in blockchain, so they're there for life. And being able to access all this data to help us to have the superhuman using gene editing and biometrics to make sure it's me. And for those with limitations, we don't have to type, we can use voice.
Hey, Anthony.
Very good.
You're the man, Anthony. That's absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much, guys. Everybody out there, thanks a million. I really enjoyed that session. I felt lots and lots of energy in the room, Shauna. I don't know what you do.
Absolutely, and there's lots of engagement on the chat as well, Fergal, this week, which is fantastic. Yeah, I think, and to see from all those ideas, like, geez, don't we have so much innovative, creative thinking spirit down this part of the world, between Dundalk, Drogheda, and all of Meath as well. Some great ideas there. Fergal, thank you very much. That was a fantastic session. There's great comments coming in there as well. People saying it was an amazing session, and thanks a million. A wonderful 2 hours. Thanks a million to all the attendees as well today for engaging and making it such a good session, Fergal. And thanks to Jack in the background. He hasn't shown his face online, but Jack is in the background looking after all the technology for us.
I'll have to let you in on a secret. Jack is my son, and he's here beside me. He's just graduated from DCU. He'd be raging that I said this, but
well, that's fantastic.
It's essential, Shona, when you're running these sessions, that you have somebody who's doing the tech for you, so you can really concentrate on engaging the audiences. So yeah, but listen, a huge big thanks to the M1 Drogheda SkillNet, to Dundalk SkillNet, to the Drogheda Chamber, the Dundalk Chamber, the Meath Chamber, to everybody involved, to all the audience who took time to come in, but Shona, especially to yourself, thank you so much.
Oh, not at all. It's a pleasure. And Fergal, thanks a million. And I will just say, from my own perspective, I have, as you heard today, and hence Fergal knows so much about my business. Fergal has worked with me and my team in the last 18 months prior to COVID, and especially last year, we split down our company into 5 innovation teams. And Fergal led the project for us because we wanted to try and think outside the box and think differently, and not just use my ideas, but use the ideas of the whole company. And it worked really, really well. So I would encourage any company out there who's interested in further innovating or getting some external help with it. Fergal's your man. You should talk with him. It was a really great exercise. We rolled it on for a good few months. So, and to be honest, we're still using the processes. So thanks a million, Fergal, for that. So listen, again, thank you, Fergal. Fantastic session. Thanks for your time and your knowledge today, and all of the real life stories you shared with us as well, and taking our brains outside the day today. Also, very big thank you to all our participants. As we said, you will get a copy of the recording of the webinar along with the slides. Hopefully, Fergal, we can issue the slides as well after today. Will that be all right?
Of course.
Yeah, great. I would also like to remind everybody that our final week, week 4, is next week, and we will have Louise MacDonald with us, who is an expert digital marketeer. So next week is all around digital marketing, which is very important also to every business. And very finally, what I'd like to do is just to extend an invitation again to all participants on the program to attend a webinar Osborne is hosting tomorrow, which is Gary Keegan, and that's all around the mindset, the mindset of a champion. So you're all very welcome to join that, and Linda will issue out that link later today again, along with the webinar and the slides from today. So listen, Fergal and Jack, thank you so much. It was excellent. And all of our participants and attendees, thank you for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you all next week. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.